A racist cop handcuffed a black woman, but had no idea she was a judge. What happened next shocked the entire nation. The sun had barely set over the city of Eastwood, casting long shadows across its streets. The air was thick with the scent of simmering food from the restaurants lining the boulevard. It should have been an ordinary evening, but for Officer Logan Henshaw, it was another opportunity to remind people like her who was in control. As he drove past an upscale steakhouse, his sharp eyes locked onto a black woman stepping out of an expensive black sedan. She carried herself with undeniable poise, her tailored navy blue suit crisp, her heels clicking confidently against the pavement. Kane's grip on the steering wheel tightened. What's she doing here, he thought, his mind already drawing conclusions. His prejudices flared. To him, a black woman in a car like that, in a place like this, meant trouble. Without hesitation, he flipped on his lights, his siren briefly wailing through the quiet street. The woman paused, her head tilting slightly as if she had expected this. Kane parked aggressively behind her, stepping out with purpose, his fingers grazing the cool metal of his holstered weapon. "License and registration," Kane barked, skipping pleasantries entirely. His voice carried the authority of someone who never expected to be questioned. The woman met his gaze, steady and unwavering. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice calm as she reached into her purse and handed over her documents. Kane barely glanced at them before flipping them shut. "You're parked illegally," he lied, his tone sharp. She glanced at the clearly marked parking zone, raising an eyebrow. "I believe this is a permitted space," she replied evenly. Kane bristled. He didn't like when they talked back. "I don't like your attitude. You're acting suspiciously," he shot back. He took a step closer, invading her space. "What's your business here? Where do you work?" The woman took a breath, holding back the frustration rising in her chest. She had encountered men like him before, men who wielded power like a hammer, waiting for someone to challenge them so they could swing it down. "I don't believe I'm required to answer those questions," she said, keeping her voice steady. "If I've done something wrong, let me know." Kane's face darkened. Defiance. He was used to people breaking under his stare, but this woman stood firm. He decided he wasn't going to let this go. "Step aside," he ordered. "Turn around, hands behind your back." A few passers-by paused, sensing the tension. A couple at a nearby table at the restaurant turned to watch. Someone reached for their phone. The woman inhaled deeply, preparing herself for what she knew was coming. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice controlled but resolute. "I'll decide that," Kane snapped, grabbing her wrist roughly. She did not resist, but the lack of struggle only seemed to irritate him further. He shoved her forward, pressing her against the hood of her car as he snapped the cuffs around her wrists. The crowd grew larger. Murmurs turned into loud protests. "Hey, she didn't do anything," a man called out. "Let her go," another woman yelled. Kane ignored them, relishing the moment. "Think you're better than everyone else?" he sneered under his breath. "Think you can just walk around like you own this city?" The woman closed her eyes for a brief second, composing herself. Then she turned her head slightly and spoke just loud enough for him to hear. "You're going to regret this." Kane scoffed. "That's so?" Meanwhile, the crowd's anger intensified and smartphones captured every second. People began to upload the footage to social media in real time. "This isn't right," someone said. "She didn't resist. She didn't do anything wrong." Within minutes, the videos were spreading like wildfire. Then, just as Kane was about to haul her toward his squad car, another police cruiser pulled up fast. The door swung open, and out stepped Briggs, his face a mask of disbelief as he surveyed the situation. He pushed through the crowd, his gaze locking onto the woman's face. The color drained from his expression. "Oh my God," Briggs whispered, his heart hammering in his chest. Kane frowned. Briggs, I was just... Do you even know who you just put in handcuffs? Briggs cut him off, his voice sharp as a blade. Kane blinked, suddenly unsure. The woman straightened herself as best she could, tilting her chin up. I'm Judge Naomi Carter, Federal Circuit Court. The silence that followed was deafening. The murmurs in the crowd swelled into gasps. Kane stumbled back a step, his grip on her tightening before his hands reflexively let go. A reporter who had just arrived rushed forward, camera already recording. Judge Carter, what happened here? Naomi Carter calmly turned to the camera, her eyes burning with quiet fury. I was stopped and arrested for nothing more than existing in the wrong place, she declared. This officer used his badge as a weapon of oppression, not protection. This is why people don't trust the system. Kane was frozen, his face pale. Briggs turned to him, his voice low and dangerous. Kane, you've just made the biggest mistake of your career. By the next morning, the entire country would know Officer Logan Henshaw's name, and his downfall had only just begun. The air was thick with tension as the crowd swelled, murmurs growing into full-throated outrage. People held their phones high, recording every second of the injustice unfolding before them. The video clips spread like wildfire across social media, with captions exposing yet another case of racial profiling and police abuse. Someone in the crowd shouted, "We know her! She hasn't done anything wrong. What are you doing?" But Officer Logan Henshaw wasn't listening. His grip on his power was too intoxicating, his arrogance too deeply rooted. He was convinced he was in control. The woman, Judge Naomi Carter, remained composed despite the aggression. When she turned slightly to address the crowd, Henshaw shoved her roughly against her car. "One more move and I'll charge you with resisting arrest," he sneered, his voice dripping with menace. His words only fueled the anger of the onlookers. The shouting escalated. "Let her go!" This is wrong. People were no longer just bystanders. They were witnesses demanding accountability. Despite the growing hostility around her, Naomi stayed calm. "It's okay. Please stay calm," she told the crowd, her voice measured but firm. Even in the face of injustice, she carried herself with dignity. But the people were not pacified. They had seen this story play out before, and they knew how it could end. Some dialed news stations, others called lawyers. Within minutes, reporters with cameras were pushing their way through the gathering, capturing every moment of the unfolding scandal. A second squad car arrived, its siren wailing as it pulled up. Out stepped Daniel Briggs, a man known for his experience and level-headedness. As soon as his eyes landed on Naomi, his face darkened. He marched toward Henshaw, his steps sharp and controlled. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, scanning the situation with a seasoned eye. "I arrested her for suspicious behavior and failure to comply," Henshaw said, his voice laced with his usual bravado. He didn't know what was coming next. Briggs did. He recognized Naomi Carter instantly. This was about to spiral into a catastrophe. Briggs inhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. He stepped closer to Naomi and, without hesitation, unlatched the handcuffs. The metal clinked as they fell away, and a hushed murmur rippled through the crowd. Naomi rubbed her wrists, but her expression remained impassive. Briggs turned to Henshaw, his voice dangerously low. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Henshaw scoffed. "What difference does it make? Just another black woman who thinks she's above the law." His words sent a fresh wave of gasps through the crowd. Some recorded the moment, ensuring there would be no erasure of what had just been said. Briggs exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "Logan, you've made a colossal mistake. This woman is Judge Naomi Carter, a federal judge, one of the most respected in this state." Henshaw's entire body stiffened, his face drained of color. "A judge?" His voice cracked under the weight of realization. His world, once rock solid in its perceived authority, was crumbling beneath him. The crowd erupted with even more fervor, the injustice now undeniable. "You arrested a judge?" someone yelled. "This is going viral." Briggs turned back to Naomi, his voice heavy with regret. "Your Honor, I deeply apologize for this." Naomi raised a hand, stopping him. "A misunderstanding." Her voice was firm, unwavering. "Officer Henshaw didn't give me a chance to explain my side. This isn't just a mistake. It's an outrageous display of racial discrimination and abuse of power." The crowd cheered in support. Naomi turned toward the cameras, addressing the country. "I am Judge Naomi Carter," she declared, her voice strong, "and I will not let this case go unnoticed. Systemic racism must end. Officers like Logan Henshaw believe their power gives them the right to act without consequence. But power is only meaningful when it is used to serve and protect, not to intimidate and oppress. And I will do everything in my power to ensure that such actions do not go unpunished." The moment was electric. The crowd roared in agreement, their voices echoing through the streets. Naomi Carter was no longer just a victim of racial profiling. She had become a symbol of resistance, of justice, of the fight against unchecked power. And as for Logan Henshaw, his reign of impunity was over. The world was watching and justice was coming. With those words, she turned and headed toward her car, her composure unwavering despite the chaos swirling around her. Officer Garrett Hale stood frozen, his world collapsing in real time. The weight of what he had done was sinking in, but it was too late. His grip on power, his unchecked authority, had led him straight to ruin. By morning, the small city of Ridgemont was unrecognizable. The video of Judge Naomi Carter's unjust arrest had spread like wildfire, igniting fury across the nation. Social media exploded with calls for justice. News channels ran the footage on repeat, dissecting every second of Hale's misconduct. Protesters flooded the streets, their voices echoing through City Hall, demanding action. The pressure was relentless, and the police department found itself trapped in the eye of a storm it could no longer contain. Alan Briggs, scrambling to save the department's reputation, announced an immediate internal investigation. But the public wasn't satisfied. They wanted more than an inquiry. They wanted accountability. Within hours, Officer Hale was suspended pending an official review, but the outrage didn't subside. Civil rights groups and national organizations joined the cause, their influence amplifying the demand for systemic change. Meanwhile, Judge Carter refused to let the incident be brushed under the rug. She took to national television, addressing millions with a message that sent shockwaves through the country. "This isn't just about one officer abusing his power," she declared, her voice steady yet resolute. "This is about a system that allows racial profiling and discrimination to thrive. We cannot allow these injustices to continue, not in Ridgemont, not anywhere." Her words struck a nerve. Politicians weighed in, activists mobilized, and pressure mounted on the city's officials. Ridgemont's mayor, forced to acknowledge the growing crisis, announced immediate reforms to the police department. Bias training became mandatory, an independent oversight committee was established, and a policy review was set in motion. For the first time in decades, the power structure that had protected officers like Hale was beginning to crumble. The reckoning for Hale was swift and brutal. A grand jury convened, and after reviewing the overwhelming evidence, including the viral video and eyewitness testimonies, criminal charges were filed against him for abuse of power, excessive force, and civil rights violations. No police department in the country wanted to be associated with him. His career was over, his reputation irreparable. But the story didn't end there. The movement Judge Carter ignited became bigger than Ridgemont. Inspired by her unwavering stance, communities across the country began demanding justice for their own. Police reform initiatives were launched in multiple states, and stories of past injustices resurfaced, no longer ignored or dismissed. What started as one officer's abuse of power turned into a catalyst for change that could not be stopped. The final moment of reckoning came when Judge Carter stood before a national human rights conference, her words reaching millions. "We will not stop until justice is not the exception, but the rule. No more silence, no more excuses. The time for change is now." A thunderous applause erupted as the movement she had sparked grew stronger. Hale, now jobless and shunned, became the face of what happens when authority is wielded without accountability. His name, once feared on the streets, became a cautionary tale, a warning to those who thought they could act with impunity. And so, a single night of injustice became a turning point for an entire nation. One act of defiance, one refusal to bow to oppression, set into motion a fight that could not be ignored. And as the sun set over Ridgemont, the people knew this was only the beginning. Lesson from the story: justice must never be dictated by bias. Power should never be a tool for oppression, and silence in the face of injustice only enables wrongdoing. Judge Naomi Carter's story reminds us that true authority lies in integrity, not intimidation. In today's world, we must hold those in power accountable, challenge systemic racism, and support those who stand against injustice. Social media and community activism prove that change starts when voices unite. We must demand a system that serves and protects everyone, regardless of race or status, because justice is not a privilege, it is a right. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe Undercover Insights channel. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe Undercover Insights channel.